Hello, welcome again everyone. And in this tutorial, I'll show you how to create a very cool dissolve material which you can use for anything, either you create for cinematics or for games, anything that particularly interests you within Unreal Engine 5. And in this case, I'll show you how to create a material just simply using two textures and set up good, very cool nodes within the material, and how you can actually work this out using Sequencer to make this very cool dissolve effect. And you can use it in any objects you want. So without further ado, let's get started. So we got our project ready for this, and you can find the project files in the description below of the video, but at the same time you'll find the model, the sketchfab model for this car, which also there will be linked in the description below. But for this case, what I've done, I've prepared this car's transformation as well as set up its rotation and a scale, so it fits the sizing within the Unreal. So at least we have a clean one-to-one scale. So now the next thing we'll do, we're gonna open this material, which is here. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna quickly look, and what I've done, actually I prepared this entirely for you guys to have it to test, so we don't have to do all the textures individually to connect all of it together. So I'll prepare all this for you. But before we can actually do the dissolve material, we have to also make sure that our blend mode is set to masked. And the reason why we want to choose mask, because if we're gonna go, let's say, translucency, the entire model will be see-through, which in other words will be very quite transparent. And what we try and do is create this dissolve effect, keeping the car's material quite tight. In other words, we don't want to have see-through effect, so we want to be like cooled entirely. So in this case, what we're gonna do is to set it to mask and have this very gradual transition of the material being dissolved, and so on. This first we have to set to masked. Next thing we're gonna do is basically pay attention to a opacity mask first, and then we'll do is to jump into emissive. So let's get started. Next thing what I want to do is I have prepared already two textures which actually gonna use this for this tutorial. So as you can see, I got grid pattern as well as paranoise. And because we're gonna do first the opacity mask transition, so I'm gonna actually use paranoise for that. And then we're gonna take care of this, but we're gonna actually use this for later, which is for emissive material. Sorry, for the emissive transition itself. So for now, I'm gonna use this, but because since we do the dissolve material, and of course based on our on this video that I've showed you before, I'm actually did so that dissolves upwards, right? So that's fine. That means I am gonna make sure that my world position is set to move upwards. So in this case, what I'm gonna do is to set this up. We're actually gonna need only Z direction. So in this case, we can use X, Y, Z, X, Y, and then through the bit component, we can actually set it to only work on two channels or one channel. But because I'm actually using my main channel, which is the Z value axis, so we don't have to go through all the steps. So what we can do is basically use the Z channel, and what I want to make sure is that it's connected all together. So first things first, what I'll do is I'm gonna go and multiply, and I'm gonna create a new constant. So I'm gonna create constant 1. For now, let's try at least make sure that it's kind of set it to have a little structure here. So let me just connect those two. And what I'm gonna do, basically, I'm gonna use this to make sure that it has sort of what position starting at that position. So basically what's going to happen is that we have what position moving upwards, but we will only read 0.1 value of this. So we're not gonna use entire 1 value. So we're gonna only read 0.1 value of the texture that we're gonna actually use this to connect that. The next thing what I'll do is actually make sure that this parallel noise is somehow connected to this entire structure, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to add those values. But let me go check. I'll connect this to this, and I'm going to do is I'm gonna right click, and I'm going to create a new constant, and I'm gonna actually go replace this as a turn it parameter, and I'm gonna call it offset. And with this in mind, I'm gonna actually go set this to 0 for the beginning. So we're not gonna do much about this. And the next thing is actually I'm going to subtract it. So every time you change the offset, it will subtract the value, which means it will go upwards in a way that it changes direction. So basically, so every time we offset something, we're subtracting the values from this here little graph, and then every time we subtract it, then means we doing the dissolve effect that takes place, right, in this material. So in this case, what I'm going to do, I'm going to subtract that. Since we added those values here, I mean those all the parameters together with texture, I'm going to go and set to A, and then let it to be in the B value. So in this part, I'm very happy. So let me carry on, and I'm gonna go and try and connect these two. Okay, those values, sorry, these values into opacity mask. Possibly at the moment you might be seeing that it's actually doing downwards. So let me just go and save this, check that's what we'll do if we're gonna start setting this up. So let's say I'm gonna now go back and then create this instance material very quickly. So right click and create instance material. So let me go and apply this to my material, this car. So let me just replace it. All right, cool. So now go. So technically what's gonna happen is I've set to this value. So as you may see now that cars dissolve material start to take place as it start to work, right? So now you see how cool that looks, right? But one thing, make sure also that your material is set to double two-sided. So at least you know that when it's two-sided, that means it's not gonna have this issue when you save this. So it's not gonna be that issue that see further. As you can see that on the other side is completely, it's gone because it's only really one side. So let's try to make sure that we get set to two-sided. And with this in mind, we're good to go. But because I don't want it to be going from downwards to upwards. In my case, I've done it opposite. And of course, to do it, it's quite simple to do because you can actually reverse the direction simply by adding this node. Let me just move this out of the way, make a bit more space. So let me go and look for y minus x. That's the one. It's called y minus. And it's very simple because what it does is basically reverses direction. So let me just connect this all together. There you go, boom, and there we go. That's the one bit done. So now, as you can see, I'm setting this up so it moves up and down, right? So it's very cool. Now at least we have something going on, right? So for now we are kind of set. So let's not bother too much about this section. So what we are gonna do now is, let's go and focus on our emissive effect. So let's copy this one because we're gonna exactly use the same thing. But instead, we're going to use other texture that we already prepared. So the texture we're going to use is our grid panel. So let me get rid of this and let it replace with this one. And then what I'll do, let me just click straight it. So yeah, let me look through it, what we need else. And I think we're kind of okay with this one. But in this case, what I'm going to do is before we kind of connect to the emissiveness, I want to split into the two colors, so we have a little bit of extra coloration. So that effect that you've seen on the video, where it's kind of a bit like a pinkish, greenish effect, I wanted to mix it up with those two colors. But to do it, we need to split into two sort of sections. So let me just drag it out and leave some empty space here. In this section, I'm gonna break into two layers here. So not layers, but into two separate nodes graphs here as well. So what I'm gonna do is first, I'm going to create an effect where it will read some this emissive color. So this section, what I'll do is right click and I'm gonna actually go for look for free color blend. And this what we'll do is basically, I'm only gonna use some information on my texture, and I'm gonna apply this to work only with all of these channels. So I'm gonna turn off some of these channels, and I'm gonna create it very, very simple. So I'm gonna basically do it by using constants. So in this case, what I'll do, I'm gonna turn off channel A as well as C, and then I'm gonna only stick to channel B, which is our vector here, V3 here. So I'm gonna leave it to 1. Rest I'm gonna leave it at 0. And with this one, I can just go simply connect it to our alpha. Let me move this out a little bit upwards. And I'm actually going to use some colors for that. So I'm gonna actually go and look for vector 3, sorry, not vector, but a constant vector 3, a constant 3 vector. Let me just go right click and convert it to emissive color. I'm gonna change this something like greenish maybe, because I did in the video. I'm gonna go and look for multiply and node. So with this done, I can just connect it just like this, so at least one is done. And I'm gonna now connect this to our emissiveness there. Yes, for now. So now you start seeing this pattern starting to take place, right? So when I go back now, and I'm going to go check this, how this will work. So now you start seeing the patterns taking its place, right? So you see that pattern start to apply for this specific part, which is this texture that's reading from the grid panel, and then it blends only with one information of the vector, which is that B channel, and it's multiplied by a color, which I actually define here as emissive color, as this free vector constant. And when this applied, basically what it does, it multiplies it with the texture information. So this is a very cool effect, but I'm pretty much not happy because you can see the texture size just for this mask is quite big, so we can just reduce that, increase that size by maybe multiplying a bit of that. So what we can actually do is go for texture coordinate, and we're gonna use this to multiply our UV. So I'm gonna go for maybe like 20. So at least that grid kind of spreads into smaller segments. So now you see it's kind of more natural. So if I hit apply and see what's happening, so now you start seeing that very cool pattern start to take place. And as you can see, it's slightly been washed out a little bit there because it gets extended. So what I'm gonna do is also I'm gonna play around to see if I can reduce this effect. So simply what you can actually do is go back to your graph, and on that section here below, what we're gonna do is actually we're going to create like this sort of thickness, right? So we're gonna control that thickness as well. So I'm gonna do is go and create a new constant, and I'm gonna right click and I call it sort of like a thickness of this effect. So I'm gonna just call it thickness. And next thing what I'm gonna do is then maybe I'm gonna just to multiply it. Let me just go multiply that, and I'm gonna set this to B, and I'm gonna take it from here. I'm gonna cut this together, so just show you what it looks like. But first things first, let me just make sure I set this to something like 5. Save that, and next bit what I'm gonna actually do is then add them those together. So I'm gonna go add, gonna go together. I'm gonna close this, kill this, and I'm gonna connect it. And then when I connect this to this emissiveness, then we should start getting some effect. And of course, still not there yet, because what it's doing, it's kind of adds all together, and then obviously makes it white. But I think because if we can just reduce it to something like small, yeah, maybe 1, 0.2, then 0.1, maybe a little bit even lower, then obviously we can get some info reduced for this material to work with. So let me just see what it looks like. There you go, check the thickness a little bit. Yeah, I can just okay, let me go back. I am gonna now do a bit more calculation. So maybe what we can actually do is the possible, if we can just a little bit change. So maybe what we can actually do is add the texture of this parallel noise and then multiply this together. So that means that what you see, this gradient, it will blend in together with this texture, so the information you'll be only getting is from this texture that blends in with this, which in fact will help to kind of reduce this sort of effect that's taking the entire blend of this entire material on the surface, and we'll only use the parallel noise as this surface. So I'm gonna then try and see if I can just multiply these together. So if I go look for multiply, then this, and then I'm gonna try and see if I can multiply it this way. Okay, let's get somewhere. We're getting somewhere. But I'm also gonna do is gonna use cheap contrast, so maybe this will help to slightly reduce that. So if I can just plug this in, and then we can, instead of using multiply, we're gonna actually use this as a cheap contrast. So let's say I'm gonna turn this off, and I'm gonna connect this to this, and then let's see what happens. Okay, we just can go with the flow. We're still not there yet. I'm gonna add a bit more to this. So maybe what I can actually do is then maybe I can then add, and then click on this. I mean, yeah, so it's kind of sensitive value, so be mindful about this. So the lower you go, obviously the more effective it becomes, because we're gonna reduce the blend effect that comes as with the gradient across the surface of this material. So if we can show this up here in the car, then you start seeing that car materials of that car works within this range where it appears to be effective. So now you start seeing these effects of the material itself showing up in the car itself. So now we can play it. Voila, that's the effect we're looking for. So technically you can leave this your cheap contrast, but the reason why I decided to use cheap contrast is because it kind of helps me with extra calculations, which I can avoid it instead of using just multiply, and I can leave it as it is. Another thing I can actually do is in this section where it says add, let me add another color. So let me go look for vector free, yep, and then let me just add this to that, and then of course what we'll do is to change something else. So we're gonna make sure with some sort of different form of coloration. So I'm gonna call it emissive, emissive maybe, more like this will be more dissolve color. Dissolve color. Okay, that's good. So let's get a go and keep it as it is. So we got these. And then with weapons. Yeah, there you go. That's cool, right? So now I start seeing that dissolve can be also replaced with some different color effect itself. And then you can get the offset on. So then if I go back to my, and then see what it looks like on the car. So then I start seeing this effect take its place. So as you can see, the material itself started to react with that. That's cool. That's what we need. So, okay, let's go back to where you should be, and then let's go to our material. I think for now we're actually okay with what we have so far. So this is pretty much a structure of what it should look like, at least for this to work. So now what we have done, we have set up all this calculation to make sure that it works with together with offset. They were already set up for our dissolve, so in a way they're interconnected. So every time I make changes here, it always also appears to make some changes here too, so that's fine. And then we also added the thickness, so every time we wanted to add this extra formation of the gradient across this material itself, then we can always tweak it by its thickness itself. So that's another thing. So another strategy here is to make sure that I can also control the opacity of its dissolve, but within this effect that comes together within the opacity mask itself. So to do this, I'm gonna actually use the same method here, but instead I'm gonna use it for that, right? But I'm gonna keep it a little bit simple. So in this case, what I'm gonna actually do is I am going to use one of these nodes which already have it here, so I can just literally copy this one, and I'm gonna stick it here. And next thing I'm gonna actually do is instead A to be at 0, I'm actually gonna use C and B at 1, and alpha at 0, which because we're not going to do much on this, so we're only going to use alpha as an A channel here. So I'm going to call and create a new constant, and I'm going to call this a opacity dissolve, let's say, right? I'll make it very simple, dissolve. Okay, cool. So then I'm gonna connect this. So let's set something default as 20.2, and I'm gonna now to what we have already existing here, we can actually add this together. So I'm gonna combine these two. I'm gonna actually stick this to my A and then this to B. And let's give it a go and check this out, see how that works out. All right, so let me save that. So I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna test this out. So let me just go see how this will be. So let me go quickly check it out in the car while we're doing this. So if I go back here, then I should start seeing that Pellet noise opacity dissolve effect does in a separate sort of like manner, while this one works with the thickness of the dissolve heat that comes within the core itself, whereas the opacity dissolve of that that comes from the word position works on a separate manner. So all right, cool. So now we got all these sorted, so I'm gonna just save it. Let me just go try and see if I can set that go. Oh, there you go. Yeah, all right. So now you can also change the color however you want it to be. It's entirely up to you. I can go back, and also we can change slightly of this info and so on. Yeah, keep it cool. Fine, nice one. But also another thing I can also show you is you can actually add something called name root declaration. So what it does, instead of you doing this spaghetti connections, it's sometimes, depending on how complex your material becomes, it will be very hard to connect them. So all this structure can be minimized to reduce this effect of having these connections to be all over the place with the material. So what I tend to do is call something root. Let me just go very quickly rename that. We can call this opacity this could be our emissive emission. So instead of me connecting directly to the material attribute, which is here, I can basically go and right click again, and the root that I've created, you can actually go and on top of it, you find it here, and you can just go connect it. And there you go. Does exactly the same job so we've done before, but in this case we're kind of declaring a new root, and then by having this named as this, let's say, emission, I can just then correctly connect it directly to my emissive just using that root itself, right? So let's do the same thing for that one, which is our opacity mask. So right click and let's create a new one. So I'm gonna go add name root declaration node, and in that case I call it opacity mask. And I'm gonna go out of here, remove this, and then I'm gonna go right click, look for opacity mask, and there we go. Simple as that. So remember that, right click, and then name root should be right there, and then connect it all together. I'm happy with this, so I'm gonna go save it, and yeah, this looks okay. So I'm gonna now save it. So let me go back, and I'm actually try and make it a little bit more organized. So I'm gonna collect all these. So if you can see, I'm actually clicking on these and I'm selecting both of them, and now what I can do is put them in the right group. So in this case I call it dissolve effect parameters, let's say parameters, and I'm gonna put them in the same category. So let me save it, and now as you can see they're on this one group here, which is here, right? So it's gonna be much more cleaner here, and I'm actually gonna use the same thing for other variables that I've created, and in this case I'm gonna do the same right here. So I'm gonna call it dissolve material effect parameter, and let me search for anything else. We can do the same thing for these colors vectors. So let me just go and call it colors. There you go. Cool. Awesome. So now I can see. Now I can get it working. So now I can save it. And let's go and quickly create like a very cool sequencer here. So I'm gonna just use this space here just to quickly show you and demonstrate. So level sequence, I call ls car dissolve. Alright, so I'm gonna double click. I am gonna add him to my sequencer, and of course I'm gonna add material that I'm gonna go and to use to manipulate. So, and static mesh, I'm gonna use the material, which is this one here. Yep. And I'm gonna go and add this offset. So the offset now what we do is we can control it from here. Let's say I'm start at 18. So every time or maybe start at 0 minus something, let's say -2. So now let's say I click on this. Let me move this a little bit out of the way, and then let's say I set this to at that distance, and now I'm gonna set it to 20, right? So let me just go quickly, click on this. All right, cool. So now as you can see, something happened. So let me just go back again. Okay, there you go. So now you start seeing the effects start to take shape. There's a bit of that glitch sometimes you get with shadows, but if you go test it, it should be working out perfectly fine. Maybe you need to a little bit extend more. There you go. But also I want to make sure that I have other texture that comes with this material. So the other texture is this texture here, because what I actually can do is to combine these two together. So but what I'm actually going to do is actually have like a set as a lerb in between. So I can use this emissive color, and then at the same time, if I wanted to only switch to this emissive material, then I can actually do like this lerb switch. So I'm gonna right click and I'm gonna look for lerb, interpolate. I'm gonna add this to this and then to this. I'm gonna close this, and I'm gonna use this as my little switch. So I'm gonna right click and create a new constant. I'm gonna call it a switcher. Okay, so that would be I think the best thing to name it. Switcher, emissive switcher. All right, so I'm gonna put it right here. Set to 0, so it reads 1 only channel. Yep, there you go. Let's just move it out of the way a little bit. So maybe just a little bit clean this up so it's much cleaner. All right, cool, awesome. So let me just move it slightly away. All right, cool. So now you see, like if I go back, and then I can go emissive switcher. So now I start seeing that I can actually use this to switch between the materials, right? So if I go back to my car, now you start seeing that the car tends to have these the texture reading of emissiveness back on. So if I then set to 0, it goes back to original material, which is this original dissolve effect, which is this one. But when I switch it to 1, obviously it turns the other texture on. So then of course we can do the same thing within this. So every time, let's say I can add this emissive switcher. So let's say at the moment it's at 0. So I can just click to key this. So now once it's playing, when it reaches the end, maybe I can switch this to 1. So then I can click on this and switch to 1. You see? So now it goes and then switches to 1. Alright, cool. We just reached the end of the tutorial. Thank you guys for watching it on this very cool dissolve effect material. So now you know how to create one by yourself, and you can use it for any project you're working on or anything that relates to your project, of course. And now if you of course want to get more tutorials like that, feel free to share your thoughts and as well as leave it on the comments below. And also please subscribe to my channel to get more updates on any cool tutorials which I'm going to create in the near future. But for now, thank you guys for everything and see you guys next time.